Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to MCB's 2025 College Information Session. I am Justine Muir, Deputy Commissioner here at MCB. I'm so pleased to see so many of you, students and your families, joining us here today. You're preparing for one of the most exciting and probably one of the most important transitions in your educational journey. So this is really exciting. Today's session is really designed to help you feel more confident and informed as you move from high school to college. We really want you to leave with practical tools and resources and having heard some real life insight into what life is like as a college student, what it can look like when you have the right supports in place. You'll hear from current and former college students who will share their experiences, everything from the challenges to the successes to everything in between. And we will begin that portion of today's session with a few questions that we've prepared based on what you shared during registration. And then we will open it up for additional questions. So we really encourage you to participate either by speaking up or by using the chat feature. Please feel free to add questions in the chat at any time during today's session. We will be monitoring it. You will also hear today from several members of the MCB team who will walk you through key topics such as the differences between high school and college and how MCB will support you, as well as your responsibilities as a student. You will also hear about orientation mobility on campus and how assistive technology can support your experience. So again, our goal is really, it's to empower you with information and to remind you that MCB is here to support you every step of the way. I expect that you'll hear a common theme throughout this session, and that will be the importance of reaching out and asking questions and advocating for yourself. So we encourage you to connect with your MCB vocational rehab counselor, your high school counselor, your disability services office. There are so many avenues of support, MCB being one of them, and we will be here for you from now through the end of high school, your journey through college. So before we begin, I want to note that today's session is being recorded, which was previously announced. So we will send this recording to everyone who registered so that you'll have it as a resource to reference later or to share with others who may not have been able to join live. So I will now turn it over to Amy Van Loo, our Vocational Rehab and Children's Service Supervisor for the Northeast region, who will lead our student discussion. Amy, please.
Thank you, Justine. So we have a great panel of current and recent college students here to share their experiences with you. Madeline Babcock is a senior at Fairfield University who is majoring in sociology with minors in educational studies and special education. We have Joyce Gordillo, who is a recent graduate of Suffolk University, who just received her bachelor's degree in psychology, and she's applying to graduate school for social work. And we have Alan Kwan, who's a sophomore at UMass Amherst, who's studying hospitality and tourism management. So thank you, all three of you, for joining us. The first question we have for you that you can answer in any order. But the first question is, how did you choose your college or university, and what factors influenced your decision?
Do we just go, or do you want us or do you want to call on us, or do you?
Whoever wants to go first.
Okay, I guess I'll go first. Hi, I'm Alan. For those of you who do not know me, as Amy said, I'm a second-year student at UMass Amherst in the Eisenberg School of Management, studying hospitality and tourism management. And I had a very long list of universities that I looked at, both in Massachusetts and up and down the East Coast, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania. But I eventually decided on UMass Amherst because I don't want I've lived in the Boston area for 20 years. I don't want to move somewhere else. But it's just because I feel that it's when you're transitioning from high school to college, it's a psychological comfort to feel to know that you have people to be in a familiar area, or even if it's not fully familiar, but to have people nearby that can support you. in my opinion.
Joyce or Maddie?
I can go next. I'm Maddie. I'm at Fairfield University in Connecticut. And a big factor for me was the size of the campus. I wanted a campus that was small but not too small, and I also didn't knew I didn't want to be in a city. Um, I am in Connecticut, so I'm 2.5 hours away from home, which I really like being away. I think it's like the perfect distance. I can take the train home if I need to, or my parents can drive, but it's not like I'm super close to my parents. And so that was kind of a good in between for me. And then also, I was looking at a lot of schools on the East Coast and knew I wanted to stay in the East Coast like area.
I also very similarly just wanted to stay. I specifically wanted to stay in Boston. And 3 out of the 4 schools I applied to were in Boston, and one was in Cambridge. So I was pretty dead set on it. And the school I chose was because it was kind of a smaller compared to some of the other schools, but also right in the middle of things. Like Suffolk is very close to the Common and some hospitals. So I wanted to have a variety of things around me.
Excellent, thank you. So it sounds like location and size were two big factors. Um, what would you say was the biggest difference between high school and transitioning to college? And how did you utilize self-advocacy to accomplish success?
Yeah, so I think that sorry, can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead,
Yeah,
Alan.
yeah. So I think, I always tell people the biggest difference is really who's in charge of things. If in high school you have a lot of the time, your school, your sport team, your TBI, whoever, a lot of the time they'll be the ones that administer and figure out what accommodations do they feel will be best for you. In college, that's on you. You have to, as a student, need to work with disability services and your instructors to make sure that you have the appropriate accommodations. And I think that that's something you need to be, I think that the big difference here is I feel like, to be effective in a university setting, you need to really know what you need and want. And I think that you need to be able to, communicate that well.
I would also agree. I think the biggest change was that I had to advocate fully for myself. And I was the one interacting with the professors, and I was the one kind of at the point of advocating for myself, which I personally really liked being able to kind of like advocate for myself and be the one that everyone reached out to. I've had to work a lot with my disability services and advocate for myself a lot. And I've kind of had to just continuously make sure that things were getting done the way they should be, which is kind of frustrating, but it's also really important to have those advocacy skills to be able to do that.
And similarly, the big focus is you're advocating for yourself, you don't have as much of a support system, and IEP meetings are so you're on your own for a lot of it, but you could seek support, and part of that is you have to initiate it versus in high school and stuff. Sometimes people will notice you struggling and they'll help you out. Here, it might be harder too, but it's important to like preemptively initiate to get the support you need.
Excellent. All right, so the next question is what is one thing that every incoming freshman should know, or one thing that they should do prior to the start of college, in your opinion?
Sorry, did I interrupt you? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was saying, I think that obviously there's not one thing that you need to be able to do. Obviously, there's a lot of things that would, but I think there's a lot, the one I'm going to focus on, I think is very important. You really need to have good technology and computer skills coming into college because again, a lot of the time, there are, TAs and instructors, they don't know the assistive technology. They don't even disability services. They're obviously they know it exists, but they don't really always know how to use it. So I'd say, depending on obviously things will change depending on your degree path. But I would like to see, ideally if you're coming in, I'd like to, ideally you would have a good understanding of Word, a good understanding of Excel, some, obviously email, web browsing, obviously you want to be at least, moderately proficient in using your screen reader and in using all of the different devices and figuring out what device would be the most appropriate for what you are doing.
For me, I think the biggest piece of advice I could give is learning how to problem solve, and like when you're on O&M lessons, getting lost and figuring out how to deal with that, or if your computer's not working, figuring out how to do that and trying to do it now while you have the supports in place for help. And so then you know how to fix those issues when you go into college and you're kind of on your own.
Also part of that is, if you can, is orienting yourself to campus, looking to see what the resources are, making phone calls if you need to understand, okay, this is what one school offers, this is what another school offers, um, so that you know kind of what you'll be getting into. Um, so yeah.
Well, sounds like doing some research ahead of time. So you've all touched a little bit on some of the resources and how important resources are. Was there one that was most beneficial for you? Like assistive technology services, college disability resources, O&M? I know there's lots, but is there one that stands out?
And what I always tell people is that you can't use these resources in isolation. They all work. They all have a role to play, and you have to use them all in conjunction with each other. Because on their own, a lot of without assistive technology, disability services can be meaningless. You know what I mean? It's not. You need to have all these things need to work together, right?
For me, I think the biggest resource has been my disability services office, and having like a close working relationship with them and being able to problem solve and work together to figure out issues. So I think that's been the biggest help for me.
I found that orientation and mobility was a great resource to getting to know what the campus buildings were like, where also day-to-day things were, like the pharmacy or a grocery store, so that I could not only navigate campus but also access anything outside of it, and also know where I could go to eat, like restaurants or social life, that sort of thing as well. Because it's also important to have and be able to go out on your own, apart from just school.
Yeah.
Amy, you're
Oops,
muted.
sorry. Thank you. We will touch on social life a little bit more. I want to get back to a bit to disability services and just academic materials. So if you could share your experience with accessing academic materials such as textbooks, online resources, accommodations, how did you use disability services to navigate all of that? And how did you overcome any barriers, any challenges that you have faced?
Yeah. So I think that you can hear me, right? I think. Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So I think that a lot of it's important to note that things have changed a lot. A lot of professors are moving away from using physical textbooks. So a lot of it is purchasing the license for some online software platform. I know to all my students, I know it's really messed up that I have to pay to do my homework, but unfortunately, that's the way it is. But I think that most of these instructors are more than willing to work with you if there's a website problem or if there's some sort of issue. I'd say I've had 12 instructors in my, year and a half going to school here. I think I've only had maybe two that have given me any kind of problems and one who, has given me significant issues. But I think that when that happens, it's important to know what your rights are and to be able to, because I feel like if it feels wrong, it's probably, you should talk to disability services, even if you're not sure, because I want, as a fellow student, I want you to have all of your ADA accommodations as much as possible. I don't. It's just because sometimes, unfortunately, professors don't always know. They're not fully familiar with the law, or they don't know how. Sometimes they don't implement accommodations properly. I have I'll tell you guys a quick story. I won't go too long, I promise. But last year, I had an instructor who she would not, under any circumstance, let me take an exam on my own computer. Problem was, the disability services computers don't have JAWS, and she would not. She wouldn't work with them. So that's the only one professor that that's some occasionally you will get the 1% of the professors who you know don't really know what they're doing sometimes in terms of accommodations. But I'd say, do your best to, if you can, try to talk with them, negotiate with them. And also another thing I do is I go on, if you go before the semester, go on ratemyprofessor.com and look through some of the reviews. I mean, I'm not saying that, obviously take it with a grain of salt, it's just like a restaurant review. It's not, a lot of times you'll get the most opinionated people, but what I look for is recurring things that are it gives you a good idea of what's their personality like, how willing are they to work with a student with a disability, things like that.
I've kind of had a different experience. I've had a lot of issues with um like getting accommodations from um I've had a lot of issues like getting accommodations from my professors. My disability services has been great and worked with me a lot, but I think it is really important to know your rights and be confident in advocating for yourself and knowing what you need and not um and like not sorry, I don't know how to like making sure you know what you need and sticking to that.
All right. Sorry about that. Um, yeah, I personally had a good experiences with the Disability Services Office. One of my first classes, the first semester, the professor asked me um, how I graduated high school because I'm blind. And the Disability Services was able to, talk to him and explain how he could accommodate me and how I could, be able to do the math and with low vision. And he was very accommodating. He was just like unaware of how this worked. So for me, like Office of Disability was happy to teach the teachers about making things accessible. They were able to make my textbooks into PDFs and whatnot so that I could read them. Um, they also they're great at resolving issues and also working collaborative with me. Like we'd have meetings whenever something popped up, or um, they'd also give me a place to test for any of my exams, and they made it really easy to do so.
Excellent. Thank you. While we're on this topic, Maddie, did you have any specific examples you wanted to share since you had difficulty? Any scenarios
Um,
of?
I think the funniest one I had a professor um take points off for visual components. And then when I mentioned something, she told me that she didn't understand why I just don't have an assistant to do things for me. So I worked a lot with my disability services to figure that out and have them help advocate for me.
It does sound like disability services is a great resource. I'm curious, did any of you meet with disability services prior to selecting your school?
I think I remember. We a lot of the time they don't want to. I think you'll find this, unfortunately, a lot of the time, that if you're not a student, a lot of the time disability services, they don't want to talk to you. They have too much, frankly. A lot of the time they don't want you to go there. They don't let you go there in person. A lot of them will be willing to meet with you over the phone. Some of them won't be able to. Unfortunately, you'll come across the one that they won't talk to you at all, which is a little annoying. But I'd say yes, it's a good idea to just talk to them on the telephone a little bit. if they ever come to like admissions events or whatever, go talk to them. It's really important. I mean, it's gonna be the next 4 years of your life. So I mean, absolutely, you want to make sure you have a disability service department that can always take your side. I mean,
I would agree with that. I did reach out to my school's disability services and kind of talk generally about what accommodations they have used for students who are blind and if they had any other blind students. And I was able to kind of frame it that way to see what they were kind of willing to do for blind students. I also think it's really helpful that if you know someone who has a disability and is currently going to that school, to talk to them. I was able to talk to someone who is blind who recently had graduated from my school and ask her about a lot of like my questions about the disability services and just see how it worked from her perspective as a student.
I didn't talk to them in advance. I knew that where I was going, the class sizes were fairly, smaller, not like auditorium style. So, I kind of thought that they would be a little better at personalizing and accommodating. But I also did look at the website that they have, and they list some of the accommodations they've made or what the process looks like. And that was also very helpful to just come prepared, knowing that these are the things they offer and feeling pretty confident on knowing that I'll receive those accommodations that I need.
Awesome. All right. Well, switching gears a little bit to social life. How did you navigate social life on campus? What advice do you have for making friends, getting involved in extracurricular activities?
yeah, I mean, so and also, I think it's important to note that, even now I'm in my second year, I'm still trying to figure it out, to be honest with you, because, it can be complicated. It's not, especially, I go to a very large university. It can be difficult, but I'd say, just, you know, do things that align with your interests. It might not have to be strictly, obviously what you're studying. It can be completely unrelated, but also a lot of these universities, especially larger ones, like if you go to a UMass or some sort of state school, a lot of the time they might have some sort of like, disability, like, resource group that you might be able to, network with other students with disabilities and, just kind of share experiences. It's important to do that. And also not just on campus, get out in the community. I think it's important too. That's why I think O&M is very important, as it's been said here before. It's important to be able to learn, how to take the bus, how to, register for whatever the local paratransit might be where your college is, that way you can, go out to the movies, go out to eat, things like that. That way you're not just holed up in your house all the time.
I agree with that. I think like just kind of joining as many clubs and activities as you possibly can um, is helpful. And I also think that just being confident in your visual impairment is also really important. People tend to get uncomfortable when you're not comfortable with it. And so by being comfortable, you can kind of show other people that it's not a huge deal and that you're just like everyone else. And that can also help.
Um, my social life was definitely helped by being in the city, um, with everything steps away, being able to take the train, go out to eat, go to comedy, and I made a lot of friends through like smaller clubs or um, also through, oh, I totally lost my train of thought. But it was definitely like smaller groups and such because it was just easier to connect out in classes, especially those that were like specially for my major. So like the psych classes, you know that you're there with like-minded people and you're doing whatever work together. So you have those things to connect on.
All right. So one other question, and then we'll see if there's questions from folks that are on the session here. What is one piece of advice or wisdom that you can give to these high school seniors here about college?
I'd say just don't be afraid of it. I know I personally 2 years ago was, very scared to move away from home, and live, on my own long term. But I think that, if you prepare well for it, there's nothing to worry about. I think just, we can relax, understand that, what happens, happens, right? I mean, things, and I think, just know that, no one expects you to be perfect in your first year. You will make mistakes. I'm not going to deny that. And I think that it's important to be able to accept that and then just, be open to what might happen.
I think that, as I said earlier, that being able to problem solve and learn skills to be able to do your laundry, but also figure out how to do laundry if the machine's not marked. And just learning skills like that is really important. Like there's college campuses always have construction typically, and so um or different maintenance issues and stuff. And so being able to navigate around that and find alternate routes and have the skill set to be able to do that is really important and really helpful.
I recommend doing your research, being aware of what's available to you, um, based on, if that means taking tours, which can be very helpful to understand what the layout looks like. Knowing what there is, both what you're signing yourself up to, resources that you could access, whether those be through MCB or through your school, and making sure you keep those in mind and using them when you need them, because sometimes it can be hard to remember and you're struggling, so reach out for help when you need it.
Excellent. Great advice. Does anybody have any questions? Do we have any questions in the chat, Justine?
We do. We have one question in the chat. A couple of questions coming in now, actually. The first question, did any of you ever think about sports for people who are blind or visually impaired when thinking about what college you decided to go to? Was that part of what influenced your decision?
I don't participate in sports, but I've heard of some like community kind of recreational stuff in Massachusetts. So if I wanted to, I could probably arrange something, but it was not a factor in my decision. But it's also very nice to have it as a potential option.
Um, so I found my school through sports. I swam, and so I kind of was thinking about swimming in college. I decided not to, but um I also was looking for like a club swim team or something that I was going to be able to make friends through and all of that. And so that was kind of a factor, but it wasn't like a huge factor.
Yeah, I don't, for me, I'm not a particularly athletic person. I'm not really so yeah, it's not really a huge, deal breaker for me. It's not, I think that obviously, for everyone's different, for what's important for one person may not be for the next, so I think that, for me, I'm worried more about, finding a campus environment that I enjoy and will be happy living at for 4 years.
Thank you. We have another question in the chat. Emil, would you like me to go to that?
Sure.
Okay. The question is, what tools, devices, or apps do you find most helpful in completing the work?
Oh my God, there's a lot of them. I think there's obviously there's more than I can name in one list, but some good ones that I like. Obviously, the Microsoft Office suite of tools is excellent, especially if you're, depend because it's very common in almost every workplace. So it's good to be familiar with Office and learn how to use it. I found that I recommend downloading whatever tracking app your local college shuttle or transit agency uses to be, it can be very helpful. I recommend, obviously there's a lot of stuff that, like, Ira and Be My Eyes can be very helpful. But then again, it's not limited to that. There's many others that I can't, there's too many for me to name in a list.
For me, I use my computer and my phone like the most, and I found VoiceStream to be really helpful with accessing like PDFs and readings that are posted on like Blackboard. I also think that Be My Eyes, specifically the AI part of it, is really helpful. Just to be able to access materials that may not be accessible, or like you just need like small, quick things that you don't want to have it be like a long process of getting it accessible.
I also rely on both my phone and my laptop. They both have settings that make it accessible. I relied on the digital textbooks and using voiceover sometimes, or using Seeing AI, which is helpful for scanning documents. Usually I do it for shorter stuff like mail or quick handout, but being able to have those tools definitely makes the work easier. So it's good to learn about them now if you don't have some experience with them, because they could help you in the future.
Kind of on that, a similar note, we have a specific question about, are there any apps, particularly for programming, that you recommend if anyone has experience with that?
I don't have experience with that, unfortunately.
Same here.
I mean, I did a little bit. I had to take an introductory operations management course last semester, which, we do, I think, a lot of, even if it's not fully, I don't know of any, we used Visual Basic VBA like for Microsoft, those kinds of, I don't know of anything like that would be, I don't know anything off the top of my head, but I do know that, any instructor or their TA are, most of the time they'll be more than willing to help you. Just ask. Obviously, I think your disability services might be able to help you. Just also, talk to, just go online. If also, go online and Google, accessible apps for programming. I think a lot of the, especially nowadays, a lot of they try. Obviously, we want to make it as accessible as possible. The implementation can be hit or miss, but
Thank you. We'll also hear from Alexander Pooler, who is our MCB Director of Assistive Technology, a little bit later in today's session for a little bit more on how MCB can support you technology-wise. But feel free to have the questions still coming. Amy, I'll turn it back to you.
So while we're waiting for if anyone has other questions, I'm curious if any of you lived off campus at all. I know some schools allow you to do that, and some you have to live on campus your whole time. But curious if anyone's lived off campus and what
I've
that
lived
experience
off,
was like.
sorry. I
Yeah.
lived off campus for about half of my undergrad. I have chosen to live in places where I can take the train to school, so it's not a crazy commute. It's also a nice walk to the train station and whatnot. And sometimes it can be a little frustrating if you have a long gap between classes, but I like being away from school, having a choice in my space and decorating it and just finding something that's it's more, you know, r removed from the school.
Thank you.
Amy, we do have a couple more questions coming in.
Sure.
Okay. A little bit back to the assistive technology focus. Are there any AI apps or programs like Chat GPT that you use in college? And can you speak a little bit to that?
I've used specifically like Be My AI to help me with like images that aren't described or that I don't have enough information to do the assignment on. I find it helpful that I can ask it specific questions about pictures. I've also used it to help me make documents accessible if it's just easier to do it myself. And so I've used it for that.
Yeah, I totally agree here. I think Be My AI is very helpful, especially if I have sometimes I'll take I'll take sometimes you got to take pictures of things. For example, if you're in whatever cafeteria, dining facility you have, on campus, you go in there, a lot of the time, I can't read the labels, are tiny. I can't read the fucking thing. So I'll have to take a picture with my phone and then, you can use the AI to kind of read that to you. I think it's, that can be good. I would caution against, sometimes the chat GPT or similar, they're very nice tools, yes. And I think that they can be very helpful, but also obviously they're not perfect. So, do be careful with that. you know, Also kind of on the topic of AI, not fully. There is it's more on the O&M side. There's an app, it's OKO. I believe it's behind a paywall now, unfortunately. I think it's like what, $30 a year, something like that. But it helps you read the whatever the pedestrian signal when you're crossing the road. Like I here in Amherst, we have a lot that aren't audible. So, it can be really helpful.
Thank you, everyone. Do any of you have a guide dog, and would you be willing to share any insight from that experience?
I have a guide dog. I'm working with my second dog currently, and um, I've found it really helpful. I've found that it's really helpful socially for me. One of my roommates I met because they came up and asked if they could pet my dog. And so it kind of helped me with that aspect of it. I also find that it's just helpful navigating a large campus, and specifically class buildings. I can teach my dog specific classroom doors. And so it's a lot easier for me to navigate like classroom buildings and make sure I'm not walking into the wrong classroom.
I also have a guide dog. I've had her for 4 years now. Um, Kind of similarly, it has definitely started some interactions. And I've also made some friends out of it too. She's definitely really helpful for navigating both to school and throughout the campus and to work. And she's very comfortable on all modes of public transit, so it's really easy to get around Boston. Um, and it's definitely for me, it outweighs the benefits of the cane.
Excellent. I see one other question in the chat. That for those that lived on campus, did you receive any accommodations for residential living?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So I have I have a single room, which I personally I find is immensely helpful. I like that I can really close my door. Apart from obviously I can close my door and do whatever the hell I want. But I think it can be good if you're, if to be able to orient, set up the room however you want, if you have a lot of equipment, because MCB can hook you up with, you might get, scanners or, magnifiers or whatever from MCB, it can be a lot of stuff. Also from it also prevents, in case, if a roommate wants, it's easier, if a roommate, that way you won't have a roommate, bringing people over or, if you don't want people messing with your technology, things like that. I do think it's really helpful, but also, it's important to be able to, get out and, talk, and socialize with people. It does make it a little more difficult, but I think it's very manageable. If you can, I think it's definitely very manageable. So
For
Uh,
me, like my first year, I didn't have a roommate. I was in a single bedroom, which was nice. And then my second year, I did want a roommate. And so I was also getting my guide dog at the time. And they were able to get me a bigger room, and I had one roommate, and kind of had more of a choice because I want somebody who is going to be not just okay with the dog, but happy. Because we had a studio apartment, so that was also very important for me that we were aware of what was coming and able to have a space for both of us, which worked really well.
For me, one of the accommodations I've found really helpful is to have a room on like the ground floor, or a floor with an exit. Fire alarm will go off at 2 a.m. and the last thing you want to be doing is trying to navigate downstairs with a crowd of people. Um, so I found that to be really helpful. And then I've also had a single room every year, mainly because I have a guide dog and I don't have to worry about if people are leaving things on the ground. I also think it's helpful. So then if you leave your shoes on the ground and you trip over them, that's on you. You're not dealing with a roommate who can leave things out too. Um, and you also know where all your stuff is. I have lived with roommates in like a suite style, and that's really nice. Um, to be able to have that social aspect. So I think that is kind of a downside of having a single, but for me, it worked out well.
Excellent. Thank you. Any anyone have any other questions? Feel free to unmute or put them in the chat. I think I see one more coming in the chat here. Do you ever find living, oh, wait, Maddie, you might have just touched on this. Do you ever find living in a single to be isolating? How do you avoid isolation?
Oh yeah, it absolutely can be. And also because I will admit, because I also have really bad anxiety. So, I think it compounds the issue. But again, I think as long as you manage it well, it can be managed, because like for me personally, I tend to be a very, sociable person. I'm a pretty outgoing person. But at the end of the day, it's nice to come back to a space that I can call my own. So I think that as long as you manage it well, I think it can be done.
I did find it kind of isolating my first year, just being away from everyone and like everyone else had a roommate that they were able to go get dinner with the first night because they're living together. So kind of helped with the friendships. Um, I didn't really have that, so it was more difficult, but I have lived in like a suite and then I've lived in like an apartment and I those are really nice to have my own room. But I'm also living with people, so I think if your school offers it, um, that would be like the best way of doing it. So then you have your own space and all of that, but you're also living with people.
Yeah, I also my first year was I was in a single. It felt isolating for sure. So most of my social interactions were through classes or some of the clubs. But despite that, the it was like a shared bathroom. I had my own room, and that's the only thing we shared is a bathroom with my roommate, and we got along pretty well. We made friends together as well, despite only seeing each other once in a while. Um, but I think it was a little isolating, but you just have to put in the effort to make yourself noticed in the club or in the class where you want to reach out to somebody.
So we're getting more questions. Any pros and cons of living on campus versus off campus?
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I think that. Oh, sorry. Were you gonna go, Joycey? Sorry.
yeah, so you can go.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think that, I think it really depends on the person. Obviously, when you live on campus, you're close to everything. Most of the time you're gonna be closer to your classes. You're gonna be also most universities will require all their on-campus residents to purchase a meal plan, so you'll have your food taken care of. You don't really need to, worry about figuring out how to cook, which is, obviously can be, especially for, someone like myself, if I'm already, really busy all the time, if I'm really, if I already have classes all day, I don't, it is a big relief for me. And I think that also, you get more, it's a much more seamless process because, obviously when you're on campus, you just go through the university system. Whereas if you're off campus, you have to deal with, you have to sign a lease, and you have to deal with what are you going to do with the 3 months you're not out of the year you're not there. Things like, well, more than 3 months actually, like the 6 months of the year that you're not there. Things like that.
For me, the pros is that I get to live here year round. And so it makes it really easy since I work in Boston. I'm currently in Somerville. So I work in Boston. I went to school for the last year. Like I went in person so it was a commute. So you definitely have to be aware of things breaking down and whatnot. I luckily didn't have any issues. I timed it pretty well. Um, but that's definitely a con is having to time things and being a little more on it. Also, with sometimes your class schedule, you might have these random, like just long break between classes. Sometimes it's like 3 hours until your next class. When I was on campus, I was totally okay with that because I just, walk down the street, go back to my room and take a nap. Um, but now it's not worth the 25-minute commute to go home and then come back like a couple hours later. So that's the one thing. Um, but the pros, like I got to choose where I was. So I'm a few blocks down from a grocery store. I also have a plaza with like Target and whatnot nearby. So it's nice to have the choice. Commute can be hard.
For me, I don't really have the option of living off campus. My school isn't really around a good public transit network, and so I would have had to walk 2 miles each way if I wanted to be able to live off campus. And so I think it really also depends on the area you're in and what public transit resources look like in that area.
And going back to the housing a little bit, for those that had singles your freshman year, was that an accommodation or?
So the way it
Yes, it
works
was.
at a lot of universities, I know I can speak for UMass. I don't know for all the places. A lot of how it works is so you'll apply for it through, disability services. And then a lot of the time, typically disability services will not deal with housing accommodations directly. They'll forward it to usually the housing department, usually whatever it is, like at UMass, it's residential life student assignments. They'll deal with that. And then the way it normally works is that you'll get your single room, but they'll charge you at the double room rate typically. So that way you won't be paying because like a place like UMass, singles, technically anyone can have a single, just it costs more. And also
Uh,
you'll get like the priority selection for it as well. So
yeah, it was an accommodation. And another piece of advice I would have is if you're planning on living on campus, get close with someone in res life and work closely with them on housing. That's what I did, and it was really helpful. And then I was also able to make sure that I was in buildings that I was able to get easily to class to. And so, like my freshman or sophomore year, I chose to live like closer to the classroom buildings versus where most fresh or sophomore live. And so I was able to do that because I was able to work directly with the res life.
Yeah, I worked also through just letting them know, here's a heads up, like it would be better to have my own space in this scenario. And I got priority like housing selection and also like class registration because of the disabilities office was able to help me.
Excellent. So connect with disability services early and often, it sounds like. All right. Any final questions? We have time for one more.
Olga, you are unmuted.
Hello.
Hey there. You have a question?
Hey, this is Hugh, and I was curious, what do you guys do if the class you guys taking like have like a graph involves graph in the textbook or something like that? What do you guys do with that?
I get my textbooks I buy a physical copy and I'm able to get them scanned by my disability services. And they're really good about scanning them pretty quickly because they know that class is about to start and you have a deadline to be able to keep up with the professor's assigned reading and whatnot. And just also for some of like my math classes, like I had the ability to zoom in and it just had more time just because I was taking longer to find everything. So they were disability services again was very helpful.
Um, I I use all of my textbooks digitally, and most of them will have like a pretty decent description of what's in the graph, um, for like textbook kind of things. Otherwise, that's another instance where I use Be My AI a lot, and I'll kind of be able to ask specific questions about parts of the graph that I need. Um, and then also for like math classes and that kind of thing, I would ask that professors have send like my disability services the exam ahead of time, and like we discussed what would work best for me. So like instead of having like several black lines on a graph, maybe they made it so then there was a red line, a green line, and a blue line. So then there would be more contrast for me to be able to do. And so again, working with disability services.
Yeah, so what I say that I think it really varies person to person, and university to university in a lot of cases. But like for me, I have a fair amount of enough vision to be able to just kind of blow it up when a professor sends me a copy. But also I would get in contact with like I'm not sure about other universities. I'm sure we have something to do guys have something similar, but like at UMass we have a person that works in disability service that specializes in document conversion. So I think they might be able to work with you to put it in like tactile format or similar.
Do any of you use reader services? So having somebody help you read materials?
I didn't have a reader. I didn't do the reader services, but similar to that, I had for a couple classes a note taker
All the
when it was a little more overwhelming and kind of more fast paced, and I'd miss out on things. Uh, so that was very helpful for me.
I use a note taker in like all of my classes, and I've found that to be helpful. Um, and I haven't used the reader service. And like if there is a class that I need help with, I'll kind of just go and do homework with a friend in the class. And then we both get to work on the homework together and like discuss it. And so it kind of is beneficial for both of us.
Yeah, I'd say so that again, I don't use the reader service personally. I know that some universities, again, it's a nice thing to have in your back pocket just in case, as an option. I know that at UMass we have what are called classroom access assistants. So especially, it's not necessarily, it can be a reader, but it's also for things like if you need to go, find a specific physical book for library research, or if you need to, there's certain, lab classes that you need a assistance with. UMass can hire a person. They have I believe they have a bunch of people on staff that can do that. So sometimes your university might already have people that can do a similar function depending on the university.
Yeah, and we will talk a little bit later about reader services and what that actually is. Um, Going back to mobile apps for one last question here. Have any of you used navigation apps around campus?
Oh, absolutely. I think that navigation apps are really important, especially as I mentioned before, I'd say, you should look up and download whatever the official app for your local transit agency is. I know for us in Amherst, it's Transit. We use that particular app, but again, download, they'll have the most up-to-date real-time bus information to so you can see, for those of you who do, if you have some level of vision, a lot of time you can see, on a map where the bus is, and then you can, it's nice to have that. Also, although for things like walking around, it can't, things like Google Maps tend to get really confused on college campuses. They don't really, it's, because a lot of them are highly pedestrianized, so it is difficult. So I'd say a lot in terms of navigation, I'd say get whatever your agency's, bus app is, but then also get a solid understanding of the actual layout with an MCB O&M before the semester starts. That way, because I know a lot of universities, they feel really large, especially if you have it feels a lot smaller than it is, even when you've been there for a couple months.
I relied on both Google Maps and the Apple Maps on my phone. I would use them for two different things. I'd use Google Maps to see and like see what's around me, research kind of, and also plan. I used it more for planning the transit routes. I found it pretty helpful in being able to search by when I want to arrive somewhere by. Um, and then I would use Apple Maps for actually walking places, and that I feel like it was a little more accurate on where to go. And then I would also use Transit, which also has the MBTA on it, and it shows you the real-time data for the buses and the trains. Um, but those are the main things that I use to navigate.
So I guess I'm the outlier here. I like using Google Maps, and I've found it works really well on my campus at least. Um, so I'll use that to I'll use it specifically to plan out how long it'll take me to walk to class about when I first move into a new dorm. And I also find it helpful to be able to, I have some usable vision, and so I'll use it to look at the areas around me and kind of figure out where things are in relation to where I am. And then if I'm trying to find like a new building, then I'll also use it for that.
Excellent. Thank you. I see Kyle and Madison, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
So I just had a question about did you ever find that, especially in the beginning, that people would be more likely to help? Like other students were like more like outgoing, or did you find that they were more like held back and like, okay, should I help this person or not?
I'd say that again, at least for UMass, I'd say people are more than happy to help you. Almost everyone is, they're more than happy to, especially if you ask, they're more than happy. Most are more than happy to help you. So it's not something I would worry about significantly. Sometimes we'll proactively ask, if you need help. But again, if you ask, I think almost, I'd say 98% of people are probably more than happy to help you.
I would say the same. I think there's a lot of good energy there, and if you ask, they're very happy to help. Also, staff-wise as well, like in the dining hall, I was pretty recognizable and would be very consistent with my orders, so I wouldn't have to do much of anything, and they would be like, "You want the usual?" Um, so having connection with both other students and staff they'll be happy to help. And if I was going to try something new, I could always ask the staff and be like, "Hey, like, what are the options? Could you read me the list?" If it was like more of a visual, they just have things out and you kind of choose based on that. They would tell me what they have available.
I agree. I've also had a very similar experience. Staff and students have been very helpful and willing to help me. One thing that I did that was really helpful was I went and talked to campus safety when I moved in and like explained that I was blind and all of that. And so like I'm able to call them if it's really snowy and I don't feel comfortable walking to class or um that kind of thing. And also, like, if there is an emergency or whatever, they are aware that I'm blind and know my name and all of that. And so I found that to be really helpful. And a lot of the officers will say hi to me walking around campus.
I sorry for interrupting. I'm talking. I agree with that. I think that especially like for me because I live in a high-rise building, so it's really important to talk with whatever your environmental safety office is because I live on the 14th floor. So if the fire alarm goes off, I can't use the elevator. I have to figure out how to get out. So I think it's important to to talk with them and make sure they actually follow up on that plan too, because unfortunately they don't always actually follow through on the plan that you've discussed.
One quick thing also, I would agree with that, but also get to know your RA and use them as a resource for like, I've definitely texted my RA, hey, I can't find the outlet. Can you come help me? And different things like that, and kind of just having a relationship with them where they can be another resource.
I also had a connection with security, not really long term, but more of a situational where security and disability services, we all kind of connected in regards to a situation, and they were able to kind of help me and reassure me that they were handling it. But it's nice to have these people on your side.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Joycey and Maddie and Alan, for all your insights. I hope it's been helpful to the seniors and families here to hear from your experiences. We're going to now turn it over to Mayanne McDonald Briggs, who's the transition counselor for the Northeast and the Metro West regions, who's going to talk a little bit more about the differences between high school and college. So, Mayanne.
Well, thank you, Amy, and big thank yous to Maddie and Joycey and Alan, all of whom I've known for a very long time, and it really is amazing to see what incredibly articulate grown-ups you've become. So thank you for coming and sharing. I think that that's just such an important piece of this day and what we do. So thanks a bunch, and I know that we all beg you and keep asking you to do these things. Really is appreciated. So my role today is to talk about the difference between the IEP and disability services at the college level. You've heard a couple of our college students and former college students talk about how they access the disability services or student services. They're all called something a little bit different. But really what I wanted to talk about is how it differs. And right now, you're all still in high school, still functioning under your IEP or 504 plan. And all of what's written in that IEP is very specific to your building and your school system or your school that you're attending. So all of the needs related to your visual impairment have been documented, and progress has been measured annually by a TVI, certified orientation mobility instructors, special ed teachers, and other related service providers, whether you have a OT, PT, speech and language pathologist. All of those folks weigh in on your IEP. And your IEP team consists of all of those special education service providers, as well as you and your parents. And if you have not had your senior year IEP yet, make sure that you are the loudest voice at that table. That is a really important thing for senior year. New IEP provides your vision and what your wishes and wants are right up front. So everything else should be developed because of those goals that you have for yourself. So all of those folks meet annually. We review all of the progress and we develop goals and objectives, and it's wonderful. But that ends when you graduate from high school. In college, it is your responsibility to meet with disability services and apply for accommodations. And typically what they want you to bring is reports from your most recent 3-year reevaluation, your accommodation page or the full IEP, any medical documentation for any and all diagnoses. And they typically do not meet with your parents unless you fill out a waiver allowing them to do so. Colleges and universities expect that you will take the lead when it comes to advocating for your needs. There are differences between the IEP, which entitles you to services and accommodations, and an accommodation plan that is written at the college level. Colleges vary on the level of understanding what the needs of a student with a visual impairment might be. the amount of technology they have, and the level of staffing in the Student Services Department all vary school to school. While you're touring colleges, I highly recommend that you try to meet with disability services. Not all schools let you until you have been accepted. So check that out as you're making your final decisions. Your IEP may state preferential seating as an accommodation, but in college, you are really expected to get to class early enough to choose the seat that works best for you. There may be other things if you have extended time on tests or use of a large monitor. Those things may not change at all, but you need to be upfront and explain to them what you need, because as you know, each student needs something a little bit different. So you've had a TVI most likely since the age of 3, teaching Braille, technology, all aspects of the expanded core curriculum, all of those things that a TVI does. You will now need to utilize disability services as well as the assistive technology folks at a college or university to kind of plug in where they can and assist you where they can. Of course, MCB can assist with additional training programs, but you need to reach out and ask for assistance in all these things. We do recommend that most students that are attending college participate in, like Carroll Center has a program called Computing for College, and they do that in person, or they have a online virtual program as well. But that really helps that transition from Google everything to Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Word, and PowerPoint kinds of things instead of Google Sheets and Google Docs. You need to start investigating, if you're not going to public school in your own district, who owns the technology that you use, and working with your MCB vocational rehabilitation counselor to figure out what your needs are going to be as far as assistive technology in college. I know for my students, I'm already starting to do my referrals for assistive technology so that you have time to practice on these new tools that you will have while you're still in school with the assistance of a TVI or an assistive technology teacher. Because one thing I can tell you is there are no colleges that use Chromebooks. So if you're using a Chromebook now, you need to really reach out and make sure that your MCB counselor understands that you're going to need something sooner than later. You have not ever used a Windows-based laptop, that's something as well, really getting to learn that technology while you're still in school. And as we heard, the assistive technology department will be going over more of that. The orientation mobility instruction that you've been receiving pretty much weekly or bi-weekly throughout school, that is not something that happens on the college level. We do have orientation mobility specialists, and you will be assigned someone to work with you to learn your college campus and for routes in and around the campus. If you're starting with a new counselor this summer or once you graduate from high school, from the commission, so if you're currently working with me, you will be transitioning to a new counselor. If you're working with a VR counselor currently in regions 1, 2, 6, 5, I think that's everything else. You will be staying with your counselor, but if you're in regions 3 or 4, you will be transferring to a new counselor. And again, as early as today, some of the counselors are starting to attend IEP meetings and really working together with me, with my students, so that we make sure that there's a smooth transition. But instead of me nagging and bugging you and your parents every month or so, this will be a shift. After high school, it's you that needs to reach out to your counselor to advocate for your needs, whether it's O&M, rehab teaching, assistive technology, all of those things will go through your new counselor. The other things that you need to be looking for as far as the changes, teachers will remind you while you're in high school of missing assignments, or, you only have a week left to get that in, that kind of thing. In college, you're going to be handed a syllabus the first day of school, and that organization and time management is going to be on you to kind of chunk these assignments and make sure that when things are due, and that you can set reminders for yourself, so you stay on task and on time. Note-taking skills, I think that varies school to school, as well as study skills. Making sure that you use this time now to really practice your note-taking skills and really hone your study skills and your study habits, because you will find groups to study with while you're in college, and you may receive notes, but the notes that you receive, you also need to figure out ways to incorporate them so that they're useful tools for you. It's really what it comes down to. The difference between high school and college is that you're not going to have as many people that are going to be kind of in the background pushing you along and making sure that everything is the way it should be, and that at the IEP everybody agrees to the right kinds of services. It becomes about you advocating for your needs. So if you don't feel like that's something that you're really strong in already, I would say your tech skills, number one, and your self-advocacy skills are the second most important thing for success at the college level. That you understand your eye impairment, that you understand what accommodations you need, and you can explain how your visual impairment does impact you day to day in the classroom. And everybody wants you to succeed once you get to college. And so I think, like you heard our young folks say, that most people are willing to help. I think everybody will be willing to help, but it's initiating that conversation that sometimes can be difficult. So also taking the time, that's something I'm more than happy to practice with my students, or working with your TVIs to really make sure that your advocacy skills are where they need to be for success at the college level. So that was a lot in a very short time, but do we have questions from anyone? And I know there's a lot of information being thrown at both the students and the parents today. You can always reach out, but if you have any questions now, happy to answer.
This is Justine. I'm monitoring the chat, man. I'm not seeing any at this point, but if people want to, if anything comes to mind at any point during the session, please feel free to use the chat at any time.
Hey, I'm not sure who I'm supposed to pass this off to.
Me.
You'll be passing
Okay, thanks, Brittany.
Thank you, Mayanne. So my name is Brittany Taylor. I'm the real Brittany Taylor. I see a lot of Brittany Taylors today. I apologize for that. I sent out the invite and everything got a little skewed. So there's a bunch of Brittany Taylors logged in. I'm the vocational rehabilitation and children's supervisor in the Metro West region of MCB. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about the college responsibilities of MCB and what that looks like after high school. So we're going to talk a little bit about MCB, but first I just wanted to mention that MCB is a lifelong agency. So most of you individuals have probably gone through our children's services, now are in pre-ETS, and now you'll be moving on to our vocational rehabilitation program, which is where you will stay until you retire. So there will be no more really getting passed off or passed around. Once you have your vocational rehabilitation counselor, that person will be working with you for a long time. So our services probably have been very minimal up until this point, as the school has been your lead provider. And they have provided all the services. We've provided a lot of advocacy, but really they've provided the services. But this is where we transition to taking over. MCB can assist you from the minute you graduate high school through college and into your working career. So we assist with job placement after college and job retention once a job is accepted, even after that. So we can help in many phases of your life. To get there, though, most individuals decide to attend college. So after high school, you would work with your vocational rehabilitation counselor to develop what's called an individualized plan of employment. This is created jointly between the client and the VRC to determine an appropriate job goal and then a path on how to get there. This will likely include college, so a 4-year university, 2-year college, even potentially a trade school. Or some people just go right to work, which is fine as well. So the job goal that you will put on the IPE will be the major that you choose in college or one that is linked to the goal that you have chosen. This goal is one that we would approve with both you, the client, and the counselor together. So if college is the next step in the process, what we would do is we would have you submit an intention to begin college by February 1st. This would go directly to your vocational counselor. This includes a statement of vocational objective. This statement would include what you would like your major to be, what career you wish to be in, what your future plans are that you see it. So just a very small statement that would say what you would like to do with your life. If you decide that during your college career you would like to change this major or this vocational goal, you will really need to discuss this with your vocational counselor first before you make such a rash decision and just change your major in college. So as a VRC, we really put a lot of effort into looking at the local labor markets and also whether this field is going to provide necessary accommodations for the level of vision that you have. So certain jobs, you might want to do, but maybe with the level of vision that you have might not be an appropriate goal. So we might work with you to determine something that would be similar, but maybe something that would provide a good amount of accommodations for you should your vision decrease it further. But we really would work with you to point you in the correct direction and be a good ally in helping you with the best choices regarding your future plans. If we're not notified and a major is changed without our approval, this could result in, breaking your plan and could result in potentially us not being able to support you further with your vocational goal financially. So in terms of financial support, what I do want to mention is that MCB does not provide scholarships / grants. However, we would recommend that you reach out to your guidance office at school, as they do tend to have a list of many scholarships that are available, and they are a really good resource to helping you locate those scholarships. We do, however, provide funding, but funding for tuition and fees is based on financial need. So not everybody is granted funding, and we'll go over that. So it is based on the tuition and fees that UMass Amherst puts out at the beginning of each academic year. So typically in August, they come out with how much money it's going to cost per calendar year for tuition and fees. That amount is the maximum that MCB is able to contribute each year. So with that being said, we'll go into how we kind of come up with how much we're able to contribute, but I would just like to note that if we are able to fund certain things, we cannot ever provide refunds to any student of any kind. It's important to note that we determine how much we can fund on an individual basis. So this is done by what we do is we provide the college that you're attending with what's called an information exchange form. This is usually signed at the beginning of the year by you and the VRC, and then we have you send this off to the financial aid office. This form is filled out by the school with all the information that they receive from FAFSA. FAFSA provides this information to the school of what you're financially, and then they provide that to us via this information exchange form. It will include the total cost of tuition and fees, book supplies. They put dorm room, all of the fees into one column. In the second column, it tends to list the estimated family contribution, or EFC for short. And then in the third column is usually where they list scholarships, grants, loans that you're awarded, any work studies, all of that. So we then would look into all of those those numbers. We take into consideration all of the free money that you receive, grants and scholarships, because we always love free money. And then what we do is we, look at the math of how much is left over. We do not take into consideration loans, because we do hope that you don't have to take those loans out. However, if you prematurely accept loans, that could potentially affect how much we are able to contribute. So before you accept officially any loans, it's important to wait for your VRC to fill out the information exchange form and figure out how much we can contribute before taking out any loans, because that could affect the unmet need. If you do attend a Massachusetts state school, I do want to note that there is a tuition waiver form that can be provided to the school. This will waive college tuition since you are enrolled in MCB services. But I will preface this to say I don't want this to fool you, because tuition is actually a very small number in the grand scheme of things. The fees is really what takes up the brunt of tuition costs. So tuition in general is usually a very small number, usually around $1,000. But it is about $1,000 that you don't have to pay by going to a Massachusetts state college. So that would be your community colleges, in any state school. Private universities don't count in Massachusetts, and state colleges outside of Massachusetts also do not count towards this tuition waiver. So with that being said, once we've reviewed this form, we do the math, we take into consideration if you receive a tuition waiver, it will determine how much we can contribute. So if the unmet need is higher than the maximum, which is based on UMass Dartmouth's tuition rate at that year, then we can give you the maximum per semester. We usually divvy up payments into fall, semester, and spring. If the number is lower than the maximum, then you will just receive that amount of that it states what your need is. So not everybody is guaranteed to get that full amount. If our full amount for the year is say $18,000, but you only need 5 of that, we would just contribute the 5. If there is not a need listed, and there's a zero balance based on the estimated family contribution and based on all the free money that you received, unfortunately, that's where we will not be able to contribute financially to the cost of tuition. So that is sometimes, something that happens. What I will say is that if the student receives SSI, then we do not take into consideration the estimated family contribution or that EFC. So sometimes that is really helpful for us, because then whatever the family makes, we don't take into consideration because the student is receiving SSI. So once the student hits 18, it is recommended to have them apply for SSI because they can receive some funds to help them through college. And then also it could determine whether we can or cannot pay for tuition costs. So that is something that could be helpful. We also only provide funding if FAFSA is filled out. So without a FAFSA on file, we cannot pay for any schooling. So this needs to be completed every single year by April 15th. So recently, we have had some schools say that they're moving away from FAFSA and utilizing their own financial aid system or financial aid forms. But what I recommend is please still fill out FAFSA, even if the school says they're moving away from that, because without FAFSA on file, we cannot contribute. So this is an absolute requirement for MCB. And even if you think your family will not benefit from financial aid because you may make too much, it's still recommended to fill out FAFSA if you are seeking any type of MCB assistance. Because like I said, without that, we just won't be able to contribute. If throughout the school year there happens to be any change in financial status and other scholarships are offered, please reach out to us and relay this to your VRC as soon as possible, as this could also affect funding. So just please make sure any type of change is notified and written down. In addition to tuition, MCB can assist with books and supplies. So $650 each semester can be contributed, and this funding is completely separate from tuition. It can be provided as a stipend directly to the college, or it can be provided to you directly. So if we provide it to the bookstore, means that you can only purchase items specifically from the bookstore. The positive to this is that you do not have to put out any type of money for the items that you need to purchase, and the school bills us directly for those items. The negative would be that you must find all of your needs and all of your stuff directly through the bookstore. So if you choose for that money to be provided to you, you will need to go what's called the vendor process and become a vendor of the state, and your VRC will assist you with this and go over what this process entails at a different time. But the positive for this is that you can purchase from any place of your choosing. You could purchase through Staples, a book rental place. You could purchase through Target, any supplies that would be needed. But the downside is that you do need to front the money and then put up for reimbursement. You would submit the receipts, we would reimburse you. So hopefully we're probably going to think about doing a training later in the school year as to how to submit for reimbursement online and what a payment voucher entails. We're hoping to do that, but at that point, your VRC could also assist you with how to do for reimbursement. But you do have to choose one option or the other, but each semester, like I said, you get $650 towards books and supplies. Any supplies that are over $50 will need prior approval. So for example, printers, ink, headphones, that would count as a supply. You'll need to provide a form, which your VRC will give you. This form needs to be filled out prior to purchasing that supply that's over $50. Once you receive the go-ahead, you can then purchase the item that's needed. Books do not count as a supply. So books, regardless of prices, can be purchased. So anything, even if it's over $50, that's fine as long as it's a book. So that's not contingent upon that. But we hope that you still use your discretion when purchasing items and make sure you do so as thriftily as possible. So maybe making the least expensive choice, choosing a used book over a new, maybe renting when that option is available. MCB also can provide reader fees to students. I know that we kind of, some of the students had mentioned that during our panel today. So in addition to being a vendor to receive books and supplies, you do have to be a vendor to receive reader fees. Both reader fees, books and supplies are not contingent on financial aid or FAFSA. So regardless if we can pay for your tuition, we can always give you reader fees or books and supplies. So that is something that you'll receive regardless. So a client, what reader fees entails is a client can essentially hire any person of their choosing to read to them, to maybe take notes. I've had students use it for movies in the past. They had to view a movie. Somebody would sit beside them and dictate what was happening in the movie. But essentially, you can use the reader fees at your discretion. So it's somebody that can really sit with you and help to allocate some of the reading to, for you and your choosing, because reading can become a lot. So you can have up to 15 hours a month at the rate of minimum wage, which is currently $15 an hour. They'll read to you, you'll fill out a timesheet, which your VRC will provide to you, and you submit for reimbursement. The reimbursement will go directly to the client, and then you will pay your reader. And this reader could be anybody. It could be an aunt, uncle, sibling, roommate. Each individual reader will require their own timesheet, though, to be filled out. MCB has regulations in place also regarding academic grades. Funding is really dependent on the grades in which one receives. A student must remain full-time, no less than 15 credit hours, unless you have an extenuating circumstance, which you'll need to be approved by your vocational counselor. You will also need to obtain a 2.0 each semester to remain in good standing. So each semester you will need to provide a copy of your grades to your VRC in a timely manner. Without the grades, we cannot provide funding. So really, as soon as you receive those grades, those should be relayed to your vocational counselor ASAP. If you don't obtain a 2.0, you will not be able to provide tuition assistance for the next semester. But we still will be able to provide book supplies and readers because that's not contingent upon grades or finances. But if you feel yourself dipping and you're underperforming, it's really important that you reach out to your VRC and know that as soon as possible in case you may be struggling. So you can try to find the appropriate accommodations and get you the services that you may need to have a better semester. If you do fall under a 2.0, you do have the opportunity to receive services again, and you can receive services and funding at a later date. So you'll still be able to obtain books and supplies and reader fees, like I said. And if you bring up your grades the following semester, we can reinstate your funding for tuition. So it's not an end all be all. But with that being said, MCB does not pay to redo classes. We don't pay for incompletes or classes that need to be repeated. If for some reason you need to drop your classes, please notify your VRC right away. If you moved, had any changes to phone number, email address, please notify your VRC. It's very important. I know we had a question about going to college out of state. So MCB will be the lead provider still because your permanent address is in Massachusetts. We will still be able to provide funding if eligible. However, costs of what we can pay are still based on Mass state schooling. That does not change. In terms of services, we can provide whatever we can out of state, including shipping services if it's required. However, when it comes to mobility or things that need to be in person, we could reach out to a local rehabilitation agency and they could provide services short term to you. We can't duplicate services, but if there's, they would provide things in terms of safety just to make sure you can get around safely. And lastly, before I wrap up here, MCB also has our internship program during the summer months. Once you're in college, you can work with your vocational counselor to find an internship that fits within your career goals. You complete a soft skills training to learn about soft skills, what's required for a job, showing up on time, dressing appropriately, disclosure of a disability. We attend an internship opening ceremony and a closing ceremony. You can do a minimum of 120 hours of internship work and receive a stipend of $1,000. So typically would begin the summer going into your sophomore year, and you can participate yearly until graduation. It's not mandatory, but it is something that's heavily suggested to participate in as it provides really good, solid experience into the world of work. And the real takeaway here is that you really should be contacting your vocational counselor for any changes that occur throughout your college education. For any help that you may need, you really should be maintaining contact with your counselor on a monthly basis, even if only by email. Your VRC is going to be just a really great resource for you throughout your college career. And we really hope that you'll utilize our services and utilize us for any questions and issues that you may have, because we're always here and we really are truly willing to help because we really truly want all of our clients to succeed. And that's it. I know I'm a little over, so if anybody has questions or if you want, we could always wait till the end and do questions at that time. So that way we can move on to O&M with Michaela.
Brittany, this is Justine. We had one quick question in the chat. I think we can squeeze it in if you don't mind. This, I believe, is going back to where you were discussing that the consumer shares what their major, what they intend to major in. So the question is, what if the student is undecided about their major?
Totally fine. We have students entering undecided all the time. I think, and we can change any vocational goal truly at any time. So if you're going in as an undecided major, just let your VRC know. Maybe we put down something that you're strongly considering at the time. So something that maybe has the most interest to you at that time. And then we'll put that as your vocational goal. And then we could always change that objective if needed. So that's absolutely fine. And then if you want, we can go on to Michaela. And if any questions arise, we can filter those in at the end.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michaela. I'm the Certified Orientation and Mobility Specialist in Region 2. So if you're in Central Mass or going to school in Central Mass, I'll probably be seeing you. So a lot of what I was going to talk about was already kind of addressed a little bit with the current college students at the beginning of this session, but basically you're going to want to get in touch with with your orientation and mobility specialist probably as soon as you make a decision on where you're going to school. You do not want to wait until August or a few weeks before your move-in date to even just reach out. The summer gets really busy for comms, so because there's so many college kids, so the sooner you can kind of get that ball rolling, the better. I've worked with a bunch of college students over the summer, and they all work really closely with their disability coordinator, the housing coordinator, all these different team members from their school. And I've seen their schools kind of go above and beyond to accommodate them. For example, I was working with a student at WPI this past summer. She got her college class schedule, I would want to say in early August, maybe end of July, but she and I started meeting at the end of May. And that was even though she didn't have her class schedule, we couldn't figure out the exact certain rooms. She knew what dorm she was living in. We mapped out a route from like the entrance to the dorm to the entrance of the dining hall to the gym, just to, like the actual school buildings that she most likely will be having classes in, and the student center. So there are like landmarks that, can be mapped out and addressed if you're commuting, just even kind of getting the bus route down or the commuter rail down, whatever kind of method of transportation you're using, nailing that route down so that when you do get your class schedule, we can just start right from onto campus. So you're just going to want to get in touch with the orientation and mobility specialist as soon as you make a decision on where you're going to go, and you accept your acceptance. Just and I'm trying to go quickly here, but really don't wait until the end of summer. And your comms is also available to you throughout the school year. I try to remind my college students of that. It's not just, okay, you move in and you're done. If I work with students as long as they need me. So if there's a new class in a new semester, or something's more available to them, or they want to learn a route off campus, maybe to a local restaurant. Being in Worcester, a lot of college kids go to dinner at the different restaurants that they want to learn the route to even walk. I'm available. But like the former students have said, it's not, O&M's not like going to be in your schedule like it is in high school. Like you have O&M class between math and science. You have to be the one to reach out. I do my best to check in through a text message or a phone call, but if you have my number, please use it and reach out to me whenever you're struggling. I will make time to see the college students. So any questions, just let me know.
Thanks, Michaela. This is Alexander Pooler. I am the Director of Assistive Technology here at Mass Commission for the Blind. And I'm going to start off by giving you guys a couple of names that I want you to recognize, and I'll explain the reason why for this. Bill Hirsch, Western Mass. Brendan Finn, Central Mass. Jim Verrill, North Shore, Merrimack Valley. Jeffrey Tillinghouse, Metro West. Frank Ventura, South Shore, Cape and Islands. In Hope Paulus, City of Boston. These are the AT specialists that we have here at MCB, and one of these individuals is currently assigned to you. But to kind of echo something that we kind of heard a little bit earlier is, depending on where you go to school, you may be contacted and handed off to a different AT specialist that is local to your area. So an example would be if you're in Metro West, say Framingham, Jeff would be your AT specialist now. But if you go to UMass Amherst, that would be handed off to Bill Hirsch. Both these individuals would work with you. When you're at home, maybe during the summertime, you'll still have your original AT specialist, but you may have a different AT specialist working with you at school. And these all work together inside of our department to make sure that we're working as best we possibly can. So just want to throw that out there, that as you're going through this, if you are reached out by a different AT specialist, that's probably the reason why it's going to be depending on where you're going to school. So one of the things that we do at the AT department at MCB is when we're working with you, we're trying to assess what are your technology needs more so than what are your technology wants. We recognize that Apple products are incredibly popular with a lot of our students and a lot of our consumers, but that may not be the best device for you depending on what your needs are. Now, if you're involved in a program that it's explicitly asking for an Apple-based product, then we're going to work to make sure that we get you the product that you need so you can be successful. But if that's not the case, then we're probably going to still work with, say, our usual PC-based environments. Now, 10 years ago, when I looked up this number, approximately 93% of workplaces still predominantly utilized PC-based environments with Windows. That number has shrunk a little bit more. It's closer to about 78, 80% these days. But it's still overwhelmingly the number of consumers that we're working with when placing them in jobs. It's going to be in a window-based environment. So we want to give you the proper tools that you can utilize so you can be successful upon graduation. Now, if you utilize an Apple product through high school, then we need to start working with you immediately to help upgrade your skills so you're going to be more proficient in those other adaptive softwares. And as you heard also earlier, when it comes to Chromebook, and we know this is very popular amongst many of the school districts here in the Commonwealth, there are very few colleges and universities that leverage Chromebooks. It is even more imperative if that's the technology you're used to using. Please talk to your case manager and let's start working now while we have time on upgrading your computer skills so you are more proficient in the Microsoft Office suite. You're more proficient with utilizing JAWS and ZoomText. You're more proficient with using a PC-based environment. One of the common things we've had here today, and I'll press that even more so, is you've got to have open communication with your case manager and updating you about where you are and what is going on. So one of the things that we sometimes see is we won't be notified that there's a problem with someone's technology until it's sometimes too late. It's not uncommon that we sometimes won't hear anything about technology issue until October. I've had it go as late as going into Thanksgiving week, where we've heard from somebody to find out that they had a problem with interfacing with Blackboard or Canvas, a problem with getting the technology to sync up properly, just whatever technology issues they're running into. And if we're hearing about that in mid and late November, that makes it very difficult for us to get a quick solution out to you that's going to allow you to catch up and successfully complete that class so you can still maintain getting credit for that and progress towards graduation. So again, when you have a problem, please do not wait. Please make sure you're communicating that. Another thing we've heard here repeatedly is this is incumbent upon you. This is something where we're starting to look more towards you as our consumers to advocate for yourself when you have a problem and an issue. Do not wait for somebody to come out to you and ask you if there's an issue. You've got to be your own best spokesperson when it comes to this. Now, everyone's had a certain level of a technology assessment done for them while they're going through high school. It is recommended that when we get towards the end of your high school time, that you get another AT assessment done, and then probably need to have one once you start with school. Your technology needs are going to change drastically when you're going into college. And there's going to be other technologies that are out there that may be more appropriate for you depending on the program you're in. If you're working in a lab-based environment, there may be a wearable technology that you would not have been eligible for as a high school student, but now this might be critical for you to be successful in a lab-based environment. We've talked a little bit about navigation, whether it's apps or other technology. These are things that we want to be able to work with you on. And one of the technologies that we see a little bit more being used these days is AI. AI is one of those things where it's a great tool to have, but it's not something that's perfected at this time. And it's critically important that you understand the difference between something that could be a useful tool and still recognize when you're getting information that is not correct, especially if it starts to hallucinate or it starts to summarize the wrong article. You need to understand, hey, that doesn't sound right. I maybe need to go ahead and read this full article rather than just leveraging AI to be able to summarize and help you with some of the work. AI is really, really powerful for helping with your scheduling, helping with maintaining your day, helping with communication, and helping with the research. But it does occasionally make mistakes like any other technology that's out there. And the last thing you want to have happen is for you to go in, say, use Copilot or ChatGPT and have it summarize an article. You don't recognize that it summarized the wrong article and you turn that work in. That's going to be very, very evident to your professor that perhaps you didn't actually do that work. It's also, I think, important for you to talk to your college and university about what their policy is on AI. Currently, I'm working on a program at the University of Maine, and for the first time in my academic career, I had a professor not only recommend but encourage use of AI in the studies. And that for me was very, very different, and I'm still trying to adjust to be able to do so. But I've talked to people at other universities and colleges where they make it very clear at those schools that AI is still essentially off limits. So make sure that you're asking the right questions of the academic professionals you're working with at your school to find out where that level is of comfort is, how you can potentially utilize it. And then when you need to, have a conversation with your AT specialist about how you may be able to better utilize AI in your daily life. In addition to that, when you're running into issues with different pieces of technology that you have, and it starts to break down, again, I've mentioned this before, I mentioned it again, really critically important that you communicate that to your case manager or to your AT specialist, but not only communicating that you're having a problem, but be very upfront and honest about what the problem is and maybe what caused it. One of the things that we used to deal with a lot more in the past was people would go down to different file sharing sites and download files that had malicious viruses or other problems with it, and that would cause problems on the system. We don't see that much anymore. Streaming, I think, has really kind of replaced a lot of those file sharing services. But you occasionally still will go to certain websites and potentially download something that's harmful. We are going to discover that as we're working on potentially fixing your problem. But if we know what we're looking for, it makes it much quicker for us to diagnose, address the problem, and get the product back to you. You can't have an expectation that if you were to contact us right now on a Wednesday afternoon at 4:53, that we can get your computer, fix it, and get it back to you by Monday morning, 8 a.m. So you got to be realistic and work with us on that. Now, when it comes to different technologies that we have to support you, that's not just on hardware. We also have a lot of software that can support you as well. So over the years, MCB has worked with our college students on a number of study abroad programs. We've supported students who are studying Arabic in Egypt or studying in Germany, and we've gotten them JAWS that was localized in Arabic for Egypt. We've gotten the German version of Windows. We can acquire these softwares, but this is not something that happens immediately and overnight. You've got to give us enough heads up that you're going to potentially looking at this program. So as you're looking potentially at a study abroad program, we can help support you, but you've got to tell us that beginning of the semester that you're looking into the program, not towards the end where, hey, it's late May, I'm getting in ready for finals, and oh, by the way, I'm going to Egypt next week. Can you get me Arabic JAWS? That's going to be really difficult for us to pull off. So the more information you give us, the more proactive you are, the more we're going to be able to help you for that. And that also goes for any technology that you have that is just standard technology, and especially if you're going to school out of state. We are able to work with a number of our sister agencies across the country to help support you. But obviously, we know you the best, and we know where you are, and we can work with you a lot easier. If we have the opportunity to work with you over the summer while you're at home, let's take advantage of that. If you wait to when you're already at your school out of state, MCB unfortunately is not going to be able to travel out of state, and it's a lot more difficult for us to try to handle some of these issues over the phone or virtually rather than being able to work with you one-on-one. I'm kind of going through these things here pretty quick so I see what time that we have available here. The last thing I kind of want to hit on this stuff is we can be as helpful for you as you are realistic about what your situation is and where you are. Take advantage potentially of AT resources on your college campus. If you do not need to have a full-size desktop CCTV in a dorm room that is going to be much smaller than I think people sometimes realize, that's a benefit for you. Maybe you just need something that's portable. And if you do need something occasionally that's going to be a full size, if your school happens to have one of those devices available, say in a library or somewhere else, that's one less device you have to carry back and forth from home into college. Be realistic when you go on vacation. I've been to college before. I think everyone in college probably been to college at some point or another. We know at some point you may be looking at spring break. You want to go to Florida. Look, there was a period of time when I first started at the agency that I can tell where the students were going to spring break based on the computer they brought back after spring break and where the sand was pouring out of the computer, and I knew where they had gone. Gulf Coast, Daytona Beach, down in Fort Myers. It's one of those things that realistically, are you really going to do a lot of your college work when you're on spring break? Probably not. Leave the computer at home. Leave that sensitive technology at home. You're responsible for the technology, and the last thing you want to happen is to come back from a break and something spilt on it, it broke, it's just not functioning anymore. You need a replacement technology, but you also have an assignment that's due as soon as you come back. That's going to be a little bit of a lag, and that's going to make it much more difficult for you to be successful. Again, my name is Alexander Pooler, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or anyone else in my department or your case manager, and we'll gladly speak and work with you and your support team. And congratulations on reaching this point, and wish you the best of luck going forward. Justine, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you so much. Just in closing, I just want to thank you all so much for spending the afternoon and early evening with us. We hope today's session really gives you a clearer picture of what lies ahead, and also maybe have increased your confidence to take your next steps towards college with purpose and excitement. So it is a very exciting time. A huge thank you once again to our incredible panel of students and also to our MCB team for your continued dedication and your work empowering our students as they pursue their goals. So thank you. I also want to just mention our vocational rehab supervisors who coordinate and plan this event each year. It wouldn't be possible without your time and your effort and your commitment. So thank you. To our high school seniors, just please remember MCB is your partner throughout this process. As you heard so many times these last couple hours, this is really your time. So explore and ask questions. We're here to help you access all the tools, the resources, the training, and the guidance that you need. So please don't hesitate to reach out. On behalf of MCB, thank you again for joining us today, and we wish you all the best as you take your next steps in this really exciting journey. Thank you all so much.